So now we're going to have a couple more lightning presentations. We're only going to have time to take one question each, I'm afraid. But first we have up Karolina from Authorea.
Hi, everybody. Some of you got a bit of insight into Authorea during the Getting Creative of peer review. What we do is we enable researchers to write and publish and collaborate on data-driven articles. If you know, Google Docs and GitHub were a mixture of those two. The current problems with peer reviews that you have a lot of data that is not included in the papers. It could be included in data repository using links, or it can be sent to the editors. But a lot of times it can be lost. It could be on a hard drive. They can't access it. So nobody can really check if the data is correct. And since peer review is easily influenced by ethnicity, affiliation, or any other things, the problem is that if we have unknown institution, they might rebut the data because they don't trust the institution. But if you use, for example, Harvard, it's going to go through even if there might be some errors. Another thing with peer review is that what I mentioned, it can be really easily abused. There is a hashtag running on Twitter, it's 6-word peer review, where people describe how their research is being trashed by some of the reviewers. And there was this big story about 2 women who were told to get a male reviewer because it would give some quality to their paper results. And then we get to a problem that peer review takes almost 2 years to get done. So it can take you from 1 to 2 years or even longer to publish your paper. And at that point, your results might be obsolete. So really the problem with dissemination of knowledge and delay in dissemination of new knowledge, it comes at cost to everybody. It was actually estimated that it costs around £1.9 billion a year. So it's quite costly to everybody. So what we are doing at Authorea, we allow researchers to post preprints on Authorea. So if you write a paper on our platform, you can, and then you submit it to a journal, you can easily link it back so editors can go back and check the data encode behind the papers. And then you can also open it up to broad audience, so people can add comments and add edits. Or if you feel that your data is confidential, then you can also open it up to a closed review of your peers. So you can also annotate documents openly, and you can directly add editors to Authorea. Another thing is we're powered by GitHub, so you can go back to the history of the paper and you can see who contributed how much to the paper, when, and what edits were done and when. So it really helps to see who really wrote the paper and who really worked on it. So, and as I mentioned before, we integrate with IPython notebooks, so it's really easy to integrate your raw data to the article. Anybody can click on Launch IPython. They can go into your coded data. They can test it, adjust it, and download it. So everything is transparent and out in the open. Any questions?
Should we have the next presentation first, and then we'll do questions at the end?
Hi everyone. So I just wanted to take this opportunity to speak very quickly about a personal example of peer review, and we're going to be hearing a lot today about the future of peer review, but I wanted to talk about an example of how peer review had really helped to improve not only my scientific work, but also my creativity as well. So I'm just going to be talking about a paper that I looked at called Are Scientific Abstracts Written in Poetic Verse an Effective Representation of the Underlying Research? So this was the idea that could poems be used to replace traditional scientific abstracts. Came about, this is a blog that I write every week. I write a new poem about a piece of scientific research. This week was based on the Nature Communications paper about the potential causes for phantom limb pain. And the process goes a bit like this. So I'll see a paper. This is from Nature Geosciences last year. It's a really amazing paper that looks at modelling a variety of different climate change scenarios and seeing what will happen to glaciers in the west of Canada based on those climate change scenarios. And it's a great paper. It's really well written. This is the abstract. Now, my background is as an atmospheric physicist and climate change scientist. So to me, this makes a lot of sense, and it is really well written. But to a non-expert, this is quite verbose. And to a member of the general public, there's a lot of jargon in there that might not make sense. So instead, I summarised the paper with a poem. In Canada, a study found how glaciers melt in the west. The shrinkage is beyond profound, with 70% at best. If we ignore the Earth's request, then 95% will go. New barren lands will not be dressed with climate change too warm for snow. The alpine streams and sapphire lakes, they too will go. And I thought, okay, great, this is a good way of communicating science potentially to a new audience. But if I was serious about can poems replace the traditional scientific abstract, then they'd also need to be useful to the primary audience of the scientific paper, which is other researchers. So I conducted a study. I gave a group of scientists the traditional abstract, I gave a group of scientists the poem, and I asked them to rate it in terms of how interesting, how accessible, how inspirational they found it. And then I also asked them to write what they thought the abstract or the poem was about, and then performed a quantitative and a qualitative analysis of those responses. The next image hasn't quite translated over to the slides, but what it basically shows on the right, well, what this image basically shows is that actually scientists found the poem to be less accessible. Great. So I was kind of expecting that, but what this told me really was that, okay, unsurprisingly, scientists aren't used to seeing poems as a scientific abstract. Maybe the quality of the poem or the poet might have distracted somewhat from that. But when you picked apart the research a bit more and you looked at the qualitative analysis, what I actually found was that the people who had read the poem were writing that the research was about very similar things as the people who had read the traditional abstract. And you can read more about it in this study, in the excellent F1000. And the reason why I highlighted this is because if you look at the peer review section on the right-hand side, this went through 2 stages of peer review, which was incredibly useful. Really constructive comments, really helped to tighten the work, was done mega fast, 3 months for the 2 processes to go through. I was really impressed. Great editorial work as well, so thank you, F1000. But what was great was that one of the comments was this: I was surprised to find that this article did not contain an abstract that was delivered in poetry. Touché. And so, are scientific papers understood by anyone from outside of the field? And is an abstract really any good if jargon means its secrets aren't revealed? Could poetry present a different way of summing up research in a nutshell, presented in a language for the lay, yet still useful for scientists as well? This study aimed to find if it was true that poems could be a way to convey fact, by splitting sample researchers in 2 and giving each a different abstract. The findings showed that whilst prose was preferred, related meanings from both were inferred. So, yeah, maybe poems can't quite replace scientific abstracts, but this was an excellent example of how peer review can help not just the scientific integrity, but also potential creativity. Thank you very much.